couple of years later, India had to face the enormous problem of a mass exodus of refugees from East Pakistan.
What you saw just now is the major build-up of the third major confrontation between India and Pakistan in the year 1971. Since independence, both the nations have engaged into major military confrontations, notably the First Kashmir War of 1947 to 48, the Second Indo-Pakistan War of 1965, and the third major confrontation in 1971, which is also known as the Bangladesh War or the Liberation War, and graduated to be the third India-Pakistan War, which changed the world map forever. Today we look into the events and the annals of history, how a situation that emerged as an internal conflict in Pakistan spilled over to India as a humanitarian crisis and graduated to become the third major confrontation between India and Pakistan that eventually changed the course of both the militaries. Hello and a warm namaste. My name is Shantanu and I welcome you to my channel The Indic Horizon, where we discuss the events that contributed to the making of modern India as we know it. So without much of ado, let's get started. The initial conflict of 1971 started with the first general election in Pakistan in the year 1970s, where the two major contenders led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman from the Awami League and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto from Pakistan's People Party contested in the election for the office of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Sheikh Rahman defeated Bhutto on a huge margin and officially became the nominee for the post of Prime Minister of Pakistan. However, the then military dictator of Pakistan, General Yahya Khan, dismissed the verdict of the election and in turn on the 3rd of March 1971 dismissed the Pakistan National Assembly in their parliament. This incident infuriated the people of East Pakistan. The Bengalis were tired and fed up of the humiliation, dishonor, annihilation and genocide that they faced in the hands of the West Pakistani administrators. The army cracked down brutally on them. On the 7th of March 1971, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the leader of Awami League and the representative of the people of East Pakistan, called out for the declaration of independence in Dhaka racecourse ground. The army dealt severely with the rebels. One such incident, the very infamous Operation Searchlight, also happened in this time period. This was led by the infamous Pakistani General Tika Khan, who cracked down brutally on the Bengalis and without any discrimination fired and dishonored, massacred, raped, killed millions of Bengalis in broad daylight. It is said that approximately 3 lakh to 30 lakh people were murdered and massacred in East Pakistan during the conduct of Operation Searchlight. Another infamous incident happened in Jaidevpur, where a rally of peaceful students protesting were shot at by the Pakistani army and 50 people were killed. Another very infamous incident happened on 29th of March 1971, where a peaceful protest led by students and civil society were shot at by the Pakistani army in broad daylight and 1,000 people were killed. Situation started worsening day by day and things were becoming unbearable for India as well. The conditions in East Pakistan started causing a refugee crisis in India as well. The neighboring Indian states to East Pakistan, majorly West Bengal, Tripura, Assam and the northeastern state, started facing an influx of refugees from East Pakistan who were running away from their homes to save their life from the annihilation by the Pakistani military. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi received continuous complaints and letters from the chief ministers of Indian states, majorly West Bengal, Tripura, Assam and the northeastern states, complaining of the worsening refugee situations. An approximate 7.3 million Bengalis crossed over to the Indian state of West Bengal. Another 2.3 million crossed over to Tripura and 1 million to Assam, and so on. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi initially tried to convince and have a word with General Yahya Khan to convince him to control the situation so that it doesn't spill over to India. But Yahya Khan gave a deaf ear to the concerns raised by India. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi went on to tour the Western world to make the Western Bloc convince and make them put pressure on Pakistan to stop the genocide happening. In one such incident, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi met the US President Richard Nixon at that point of time. Upon a long discussion about the condition worsening in East Pakistan, President Nixon gave a deaf ear to Mrs. Gandhi and rather blamed India for all the problems going on in East Pakistan. A dejected Mrs. Gandhi returned to India to think about the next course of action. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi called upon an emergency cabinet meeting on the 28th of April 1971. The meeting was attended by the member of the Indian cabinet at that point of time and the Chief of Army Staff, General Sam Manekshaw. After an initial discussion with the ministers of her cabinet, Mrs. Gandhi then turned to the Chief of Army Staff, instructing him to take control of the situation in East Pakistan and get the Indian troops moving in there. A very famous dialogue and a conversation emerged from that discussion. Let's hear those conversations.
And Mrs. Gandhi, in an awful temper, looked at me and read out messages from the Chief Minister of West Bengal. The thousands of refugees have poured in. From the Chief Minister of Assam, the Chief Minister of Tripura. And she looked at me and said, "What are you doing about it?" "Nothing. What's it got to do with me?" She said, "I want you to do something." I said, "What do you want me to do?" She said, "I want you to march into East Pakistan." I said, "That means war." So she said, "I don't mind if it's war." So I said, "Oh, have you read the Bible? God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light. And you say, 'Let there be war,' and there war. Are you ready?" "I certainly am not." Then I said, this was about 23rd of April. I said, "You know, the Himalayan passes are opening. And if the Chinese give us an ultimatum," and I said, "the monsoon will be breaking in a few days' time. And when it rains in that part of the world, it pours. Rivers become like oceans. If you stand on one bank, you can't see the other. My movement will be confined to roads. Because of climatic conditions, the Air Force will not be able to support me. And if I were to go in, I guarantee you 100% defeat." I said to Mrs. Gandhi, "Will you now give me your orders?" And then she, "All right, cabinet would meet again at 4 o'clock. So everybody started walking out, I being the junior one. A smile on my face as I was going out. She said, "Chief, stay behind." I said, "Prime Minister, before you open your mouth, shall I send in my resignation on grounds of health, mental or physical?" And she said, "Oh, sit down, Sam, tell me. Everything you told me is the truth?" I said, "Yes, everything I've told you is the truth." I said, "It's my job to fight to win, not to lose." And she smiled at me. She said, "All right, Sam, you let me know when you're ready."
After this meeting, plans were put into place. The political, bureaucratic and the military leadership of the country started making preparation for an imminent war which was approaching near. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi started touring the world over to get support for her action for a possible war action in East Pakistan, which will gradually lead to the Third Indo-Pakistan War. In one such major conduct, in the month of August 1971, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi signed a treaty of friendship and mutual cooperation with the Soviet Union on behalf of India, in which the Soviet Union was bound to defend India in a point of need and of military circumstances. Today in India we celebrate the 50 years of the same treaty. The military leadership of the country sprung into action. The Chief of Army Staff, General Sam Manekshaw, Chief of Air Force, Air Chief Marshal Pratap Lal Chandra, and the Chief of Navy, Admiral S.M. Nanda, started mobilizing their troops for the imminent war. In one such action, the Mukti Bahini was formed in Bangladesh and gradually strengthened by the Indian Armed Forces. The Mukti Bahini is a force form of guerrillas in Bangladesh who started waging war against the Pakistani army. They were reinforced, trained and provided supplies by the officers in India and in the neighboring states where they held their camps. Indian troops used to guide them for their next course of actions and their daily activities. Another interesting part of the Mukti Bahini was a force for the women commanders who also came forward to protect their honor against the Pakistani army, which was in that time a force of occupation in East Pakistan. The Mukti Bahini and the Indian Armed Forces started providing a crucial defeat to the Pakistani forces. Gradually, in some places, the Pakistani army even had to retreat by the vigor of the attacks by the Mukti Bahini. On the 3rd of December 1971, Pakistan attacked India by air bombing on 11 Indian airfields, viz. Srinagar, Ambala, Avantipur, Uttarlai, Jamnagar, Jaisalmer, Jodhpur, Bikaner, Agra, Pathankot and Amritsar under the code name Operation Changes Khan. These attacks, however, happened in a haste and waste as the Indian Air Force has already intercepted the same and many of the Pakistan Air Force bombs dropped in runways and open fields and some into villages. In retaliation to this, the Indian Air Force struck back the Pakistanis the next day itself by striking on the Pakistani air bases in Chanderi, Shorkot, Murid, Miawali, Masroor, Misalwala and Sargora, inflicting heavy damages to the Pakistan Air Force as many of their jets were parked outside with an intent of subsequent attack on India, which could not happen as such. On the night of 4th and 5th December, the Indian Navy's 22nd Missile Squadron bombed Pakistan commercial and military port of Karachi. The attacks has been codenamed as Operation Trident and Python, which completely blockaded the Pakistani Navy and established Indian superiority in Arabian Sea. Another operation by the Navy with the Indian submarine INS Rajput submerging the Pakistani submarine PNS Ghazi, which was leased from the USA off the Visakhapatnam coast. After that, Indian aircraft carrier INS Vikram bombed heavily on the Chittagong port, thereby establishing complete Indian superiority in the Bay of Bengal. The Indian Air Force flight several sorties over East and West Pakistan and annihilated the Pakistani military on both sides. One of the famous air raids by India into West Pakistan was on 8th December 1971 when Indian Air Force Hunter attacked Pakistan's base at Murid and destroyed 5 F-86 Sabre jets. The Indian Air Force gradually ran 1,978 sorties in East and 4,000 in West Pakistan. The Pakistan Air Force has lost a minimum of 75 to 100 aircrafts, including those of donor countries. The Indian Army conducted a blitzkrieg attack on East Pakistan, meaning a sudden and heavy attack to which the enemy had no response or time to retaliate to. One famous battle was in Basantar, in the western sector, led by 17 Puna horse, which was otherwise known as Fakhr-e-Hind, that means Pride of India. Led by a charismatic young officer, Second Lieutenant Arun Khetarpal, who gave a bloody nose to the enemy, and even after his tank being hit, did not abandon it and was killed in action in the front. He was posthumously awarded the Param Veer Chakra. Alongside, Major Hoshiar Singh, on 15 December in Shakargarh sector, undauntedly charged enemy in a hand-to-hand fighting, even after being severely wounded by enemy shelling, which in turn inspired his men to capture the objective. He was also posthumously awarded the Param Veer Chakra. Another very famous incident happened in Longewala, which was adapted into the Bollywood movie Border, in which a total of 120 troops from 23 Punjab regiment were manning the post at Longewala, which gradually came into Pakistani attack by a complete Pakistani battalion of 2,000 personnel with tank and heavy artillery. However, even with a numerical superiority but lacking the knowledge of the terrain and gaining disadvantage of the terrain, the Pakistanis lost all that they had. India suffered only 2 casualties in this front in Longewala, and the Pakistani military was completely routed by the subsequent bombing by Indian Air Force the very next day from Jaisalmer on the 6th of December. The front was led by the very famous Major Kuldeep Singh Chandpuri, who was later awarded the Mahavir Chakra. India steadily maintained the superiority in both east and western sector. The Tangail airdrop operation further reinforced India's victory in East Pakistan. The enemy suffered complete annihilation and was left bloody-nosed. The US came in open support to Pakistan, which subsequently received support from Europe and US allies in Middle East, mainly Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Libya, Iran and lot others. Sri Lanka also at that time provided logistical support to Pakistan. The Soviets, however, allied to India and had warned the Chinese against opening a new war front with India at that time, else it would attack from the north. China therefore preferred to stay away from the conflict but assisted Pakistan indirectly with arms and ammunition. One major incident which led to a nearby confrontation of the 2 superpowers in the world that time was when the US warned India of any further attacks on Pakistan and as a threat dispatched the US 7th Fleet to the Bay of Bengal to threaten the Indian military. The 7th Fleet was led by the 75,000-ton nuclear power USS Enterprise along with its carrier battle group. On the other hand, the United Kingdom sent its carrier battle group, the HMS Eagle, along with a commando unit to threaten India from the west. India, however, did not panic and sent an SOS to the Soviet Navy. Under the Mutual Cooperation and Security Agreement it signed in August 1971. The Soviets immediately dispatched a flotilla of nuclear submarines under the Pacific Fleet led by Admiral Vladimir Kruglenko, which remained submerged until the US and the UK carrier battle group arrived at their close engaging ranges. The satellite images later revealed to the commanders of the carrier battle groups of the US and the UK of the presence of the Soviet Navy flotilla. As such, both the countries decided not to engaged into a direct military confrontation with the Soviet Navy and therefore retreated from the battlefield. Apart from the military engagements that were taking place between India and Pakistan on the grounds, a diplomatic war began in the United Nations to call upon an immediate ceasefire. The United States and its allies wanted an immediate ceasefire and end to the war in support of Pakistan. However, the Soviet Union vetoed the resolution and the same could not be passed twice in the United Nations Security Council. On the 14th of December 1971, Indian Air Force bombed the governor's house in Dhaka. This was a least anticipated attack. On the other hand, Indian Army had encircled Dhaka on all sides. The Indian Navy had still continued with the blockade of Pakistani coast. On the 15th of December, Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, Commander-in-Chief of the Indian and Bangladeshi forces in East Pakistan, and Major General J.F.R. Jacob, Chief of Indian Army's Eastern Command, sent an ultimatum to the Pakistani commander in Dhaka, General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi, for surrender. A 30 minutes window was offered for the same on 16th December 1971. General Niazi initially refused to accept it, but with the looming danger his troops may face in the hands of Mukti Bahini and an imminent defeat, accepted the offer and sent a message to confirm the same to the Chief of Indian Army, General Sam Manekshaw. The next day, on the 16th December 1971, Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, Major General J.F.R. Jacob and General Sagat Singh landed in Dhaka by an Indian Air Force helicopter. At 4:30 p.m. in Ramana Racecourse in Dhaka, the instrument of surrender was signed by General Amir Abdullah Khan Niazi in front of Lieutenant General Jagjit Singh Arora, in which 90,000 Pakistani troops surrendered before Indian Army in East Pakistan. With the automatic signing of the instrument of surrender, all the 90,000 troops and the prisoner of war came under the direct command of the Indian military. General Jagjit Singh Arora was accompanied by the Air Chief Marshal and Admiral S.M. Nanda. As a mark of surrender, General Niazi handed over his pistol to General Jagjit Singh Arora, which till date is preserved at the Indian Military Academy in Dehradun. The nation of Bangladesh was born and India became the first country to recognize it. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi broadcasted the victory of India to the nation in a conflict that spun for more than a year, covering various geographical locations from the easternmost sector of India to the westernmost sector, came to an end thereafter. In 13 days of official conflict, the Indian military was able to carve out a new nation and change the world map forever. Today, as the nation celebrates 50 years of the glorious victory of 1971, let us bow our heads to the men and women in uniform who gave all they had so we can live peacefully at our homes. Let us pay homage to the fallen souls of war who sacrificed without a second thought for the nation as a whole. With this, I conclude the first episode of Victory series. We meet again soon to remember and relive another event which contributed in the making of our great nation. Please let know in the comment section if you have any specific demands. If you like the video, please share it with your friends and family, and do not forget to subscribe to the Indic Vision. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.